This is your Rugby World Cup report card for South Africa, the champions. And on this video, I'm going to take a look at what led up to the 2023 World Cup for South Africa, the tournament itself, giving him a mark out of 10, and then what comes next. And well, that's what I've done on most of the videos so far, and all the other countries I've done so far are in the feed. In the case of South Africa, I think it's appropriate, given that they, with this win, became two-time champions. Only New Zealand have done that in the past, but to be the first nation to get to 4 World Cup titles, making them the greatest rugby nation of all time, I think, spoiler alert, they got the perfect 10. I think it's more interesting to discuss how they got there, what happened, why I regard it as a perfect 10, and what comes next. So yeah, all of that to discuss on the video. I'm Tim, this is Egg Chasers. Please, if I haven't already, I hope I earn your subscription on the channel. I'm humbled and absolutely buzzing to have gone through 60,000 subscribers this week, which is way beyond what I could have imagined when I started out at the start of the year. So it's been a wild ride. Thanks for being on board. You can spread the word of the channel because it's just me. I've got no corporation behind me, no marketing budget. I just need you. Give that video a thumbs up. That helps spread the word, and get stuck in the comments then. Lots to discuss. And when we look at this 2023 World Cup winning team, I talked about discussing what's next. A little preview about what I'll be talking about towards the end of the video. I think the only thing that would have to be on the mind of every South African, every player, Rassie Erasmus and the other coaches and the backroom staff, would have to be surely the three-peat. Can they do, they've equalled what New Zealand did in 2011-15 with back-to-back World Cups, can they do what no team has ever done? And can they elevate themselves from being in the conversation for the greatest rugby team of all time? There's a video on that, who's the better team, the New Zealand 2015 or South Africa 2023, that's in the channel right now. The debate would be over. This would be the greatest rugby team of all time, but I think more than that, if they were to win in 4 years' time, it would make them quite possibly one of the greatest sports teams of all time, up there with the New England Patriots under Bill Belichick and Tom Brady, up there with Michael Jordan's Chicago Bulls, up there with Sir Alex Ferguson's Manchester United of the 90s. That is how impressive and how amazing it would be if South Africa were to win in 4 years' time. So lots to discuss on what comes next. But taking it back to the start, let's go back to 2019. And they won that World Cup, and Rassie Erasmus would be the first to admit this, ahead of schedule. He took over when there was turmoil in South African rugby, and they managed to find, or Rassie Erasmus managed to, I mean, he had a lot of talented players, but he managed to find a spirit and a pragmatic game plan, which was very, very effective in the 2019 World Cup. But Rassie has spoken about the fact his eyes were always on 2023 as being when the fruits of their labour would come to bear. It happened ahead of schedule. And I think what that has done for South Africa in the last 4 years is it just took the pressure off a little bit. It meant that they could try things in the confidence that even if it cost them the odd win, and South African fans are among the most passionate on earth and hate losing, as they should, that they gave them the leeway to do that. Of course, after the 2019 World Cup, they didn't play again until the British and Irish Lions series. So to win that, again with quite a pragmatic game plan, much like the 2019 World Cup, that was a really impressive thing to do. And it was after that the experimentation came. Some of the results, not quite what fans would have wanted, but in doing so, they blooded a lot of players. You think about the game against Wales, where they just completely changed everything, risked losing the game, which they ended up doing. However, it was part of a long-term plan, and Rassie Erasmus had already by this point handed the reins to Jacques Nienaber, although you kind of think Rassie Erasmus was the puppeteer in the background. But Jacques Nienaber, clearly a very talented guy, and in terms of evolving South Africa's play, massively influential. A lot of players tried and tested. Only some of them cut the mustard for the World Cup. And the new caps from the guys that were capped in between World Cups. So these guys were capped from 2021 to 2023, and they made the World Cup squad. Other than that, it was already people that had been Springboks during or before the last World Cup. And so Dion Fourie, yeah, they found themselves a real good young talent in Dion Fourie. Jasper Wiese, Jean Kleyn, Jaden Hendricks. I've just realised that I haven't got Grant Williams on that picture. Apologies to Grant Williams, he should be there as well. But Marnie Libbok, Kurtley Arendse and Kanan Moody, some wildly talented guys who evolved the way South Africa played, brought some youth into it. Interestingly, Kurtley Arendse, out of those, is the only one of the new caps between World Cups that started in the World Cup final. So that's what was so noticeable about South Africa is how much of that 2019 DNA was, well, how many of the players were still there from one World Cup to the next, which when it came to the actual World Cup itself was massively important. And let's look at that, because I was there in Marseille for that opening weekend win against Scotland. Seriously impressive defence. Peter Steph du Toit leading it there, just shut Finn Russell down and made Scotland look average. They only managed to get 3 points, did Scotland, and it was a really good win. Marnie Libok's no-look kick pass was a highlight, and Grant Williams there almost scored what would have been one of the great World Cup tries. A routine 76-0 win against Romania followed that, where they showed a little bit more of that attacking prowess, and then that brought us to Paris. I was there that night, one of the greatest games I've ever watched. In fact, I think it is the greatest game I've ever watched in person. The atmosphere was unbelievable, and it was something else. And it's only with hindsight, I think this was the winning of the World Cup on this night. When you make sense of how the World Cup went overall, I think this was the night where South Africa, when you look back, this is where the World Cup was kind of won, because they were willing to try things. They'd already got the win against Scotland under their belt, so they weren't afraid of losing to Ireland, because it didn't really matter who they faced in the quarter-final out of France or New Zealand, did it? So they could afford to lose, so they tried the 7-1 split again, which they'd only tried against against New Zealand before the World Cup at Twickenham. Now they tried it in a really important crunch World Cup game against top opposition in the same stadium that they would then go and try it in a World Cup final. They also rotated their squad quite a bit through the pool stages, and even through the pool stages, and even in this game they tried some combinations out that they would not touch again for the rest of the World Cup. They were willing to lose to learn things. They were trying to win, don't get me wrong. And the other reason I think this might have been the winning of the World Cup is the performance of Marnie Libok, because his kicking was put under pressure against real top opposition where tiny margins matter. And he was found wanting. And just think, had South Africa won this game, had Marnie Libok's kicking not been the talking point it was after this game, then in the semi-final, when South Africa was struggling against England, they may not have taken Libok off as early as they did. They may have waited even 10 minutes more. They may have waited to half-time. That may have been too little too late. Doing it in the way they did in the semi-final was absolutely pivotal when you look back on it. Handré Pollard being on the field for 50 minutes of that match. And were it not for this game against Ireland in Paris, they may not have done that. Tonga wrapped up a 49-18 win to finish the pool, and then we came to the quarterfinals back in Paris for one of the greatest games of all time. Incredible. A heroic performance from South Africa, beating arguably the best French team ever assembled and winning every single little battle that they had to win. You kind of can't fathom how they managed to win that one. They took every single chance they had, managed to deny France some chances, and when talk about small margins, Cheslin Colby's attitude to chase down Thomas Ramos's conversion just typified the fact that they were just going to find every tiny little angle and percent in order to win that game, which they did, which took them to the semi-final. And you could see that South Africa struggled to get themselves emotionally back up to that level in the semi-final, and England managed to deliver their best performance since the last World Cup, and South Africa were rattled. And like I say, made that call with Libok early in the match. That, with Quagga Smith and Oxenche and Vincent Koch, made the difference. Those four guys off the bench won that game ultimately for South Africa. They again found a way, and that took us to the final, where they were ultimately victorious against New Zealand. And again, think about little moments. And this is it. This typifies this South Africa. I talked about the start of the tournament, their defence against Scotland. The thing that I really remember out of that World Cup final is that Kurt Lee Arendt's try-saving tackle. What a moment. And I just don't know if any other team on earth would have stopped Rico Ioane scoring that try. There's just something about this team that managed to do very special things when it really matters. And I've given South Africa a 10 out of 10 for their World Cup campaign. And that implies perfection. But when you actually look at it, they weren't perfect. They lost against Ireland. They were rattled against England. They didn't play their best against New Zealand, but they found a way to win. And I would say that this team are greater than the sum of their parts. They managed to deliver more collectively than the talent of the individuals should allow them to do. And that is because, and no one typifies this more than Sia Khaleesi, the greatest rugby captain ever, in my mind. I think even if they'd lost the final, even if they hadn't won this World Cup, that was all because of what rugby has done for South Africa and the way that he has led this team and the interest that he has managed to generate in rugby in South Africa and around the world. He is the global superstar of our sport. But South Africa managed to... They're greater than the sum of their parts because they're playing for more than each other, more than their families, more than even representing their country. They're playing because in a way they are trying to lead their country to somewhere better. And that is just an unbelievably powerful force, which is why you can't help but admire it, and you have to give them, like I say, that perfect 10. As for the future, let's talk about that. The journey towards the three-peat, it begins now, doesn't it? And in terms of the coaching staff, Jacques Nienaber gone to Leinster. I suspect he might be back before the next World Cup. That's certainly the kind of noises that Jacques Nienaber is making. Rassie Erasmus, the director of rugby, has interviewed for a new head coach, and Rassie Erasmus interviewed for that position. So Rassie Erasmus interviewed Rassie Erasmus and decided that Rassie Erasmus was the best candidate for the job. So Rassie Erasmus offered the job to Rassie Erasmus, and Rassie Erasmus accepted the job from Rassie Erasmus as head coach. I'm so glad he's still sticking around. There were rumours about Rassie going to Ireland. It had to be him. There's been talk about handing the reins over to someone else replacing Jacques Nienaber. But I'm glad it's Rassie Erasmus because the rebuilding job is much, much bigger this time round. Jacques Nienaber could just kind of ride the wave of 2019 with largely the same players and take it through. There's going to be more churn this time because of the age profile of the South Africa squad. Some of those guys that were in the last two World Cups will be able to make it to the next one. Maybe Pieter-Steph du Toit can, if he can stay fit. Maybe Eben Etzebeth will, if it doesn't take too much of a toll on his body rugby over the next few years. They'll both be, 36? Same goes for Frans Malherbe. He could well make it. But you're not going to be able to have all of these mid-30s guys. Some of them will not make due to injury, due to form, and just due to the necessity that you need a bit of fresh energy and some fresh legs. So Malcolm Marx and Lucanio Am and Andre Pollard, you'd imagine they would be in prime age by the time of the next World Cup. But there's going to be more players. And the one thing I know about Rassie Erasmus, he will already have 100 names that he thinks are on his radar. Some players we've never heard of that will end up being household names in the next 4 years. But one thing I know to be true, South Africa never have any trouble producing good players. There will be some absolute future stars waiting in the wings. They managed to fill other national teams full of South African-born players. They're going to find a few more of their own. I like the look of Johan Grobbelaar at hooker. I like the look of Morat the lock. Evan Roos looks like an absolute beast. Hasn't delivered in a Springbok jersey in the way that people expected yet, but he's still young. In the next 4 years, he could well do in the back row. And Henko van Veek is an example of a back that's got a lot of talent and is starting to come through in a Super Rugby context, having starred for the under-20s, and we will see, could well occupy one of those centre positions. Maybe him and Keenan Moody could be the centre partnership in the future for the Boks. But there's going to be lots of players like the last 4 years that are tried and don't make the cut, some that we don't even know about that will end up being superstars. Who could have predicted the story and the journey of Dion Fourie, for example? And there'll be a few more curveballs up Rassie's sleeve. I have absolutely no doubt of that, and I can't wait to see what happens next. On that, I'm hoping to get myself out to South Africa in the summer, or would that be winter, in South Africa for the Ireland tour. Anyone heard when the dates of that are? I keep looking online and I can't find any information. So if it's been published or is somewhere in South Africa, please let me know, because I want to try and make plans and get out there, because I want to try and see with my own eyes some of these future Boks stars. Leave your comments. Tell me who the people I need to watch out for, who could make the 2027 World Cup squad, what the chances are of the three-peat, and if you agree that South Africa deserve the perfect 10 out of 10. Get stuck in the comments. Give the video a thumbs up to spread the word. Subscribe to the channel. I'll see you on the next one.